Welcome to Abode with Afta, the podcast where we step inside real homes and uncover the stories behind the renovations. I'm your host and interior designer Ashley, and I'm speaking with homeowners and industry experts about what it really takes to transform a house. Hi and welcome back to another episode of Abode with Afta. Today I'm back in the studio for another solo episode where we're going to bring you a deep dive on why your home isn't working the way you think it might, even though you've tried every avenue. So this episode is for you. At different stages really, you might be building your own house, which follows on from our last episode. So if you've not listened to that one, be sure and go back to it. Maybe your walls are up, you have furniture in there, but it's just not working for you. Or maybe you're about to plan things like built-in storage and you're just not sure where to put them based on what you already have in the space and what possibilities are out there. So all of these wee tips come back to one key thing, and that is space planning. So this is something that we're really going to get into today. And hopefully by the end of this episode you have a better understanding of what space planning is and what interior designers focus on to making your space maximalist in terms of working for you the most, storage set up for your needs, and touching on zones and flow of the space as well, because that's something that's really important. So before we get into today's episode, if you're watching this right now, please hit that like and subscribe button to support our channel. It really means a lot. We're getting deeper and deeper into these episodes, and we'd also love to hear your feedback in the comments on something that you've been able to take away from today's episode. So let's get into it. What is space planning? So space planning is something that you might think is just very much used by architects. It might come to your head a floor plan drawn on CAD, so lots of lines and that kind of bird's eye view of a home or just any space really, the blueprint for any space. So as an interior architectural designer, we also use space plans and we do the CAD and the floor plans, and it's actually one of my most favourite parts of a project, the really early doors part of it. So what does a space plan look like in terms of if I was working with you as a client? So that comes from after an initial kind of meet and greet or a home consultation. We would take measurements of your space. So we would look to identifying, internal measurements of the space, windows, doors, positions, and we'll also maybe track your current electrics, lighting, things like that. So after your plans are made up, you are basically left with your empty skeleton. Now, I'm going to talk just now on if we were starting from scratch with a client and not quite moving the furniture. So if we're starting from scratch with you as a client, we would be looking at how much space you actually have that we have to work with. And then through the consultation, we would be asking, what does your household look like? So who all lives there? Who all needs to use this space? What room do you feel yourself, gravitating towards? How do you want to feel in this space? And that will kind of touch into the colour psychology and things like that. But going back to space planning, it just helps us understand, firstly, how you want to flow through a space, because this might just be because I am a designer and I notice these things, but I notice if a space isn't working properly, if things are too tight in the room, if you have to walk through one space to another that doesn't quite feel right, then that's, a knock with the flow. So basically when we have our space plans, we just have like a very accurate to scale, mini digital computer drawing of your space, which we can then work with and pluck and tweak. And getting things right at this phase saves so much time and also cost down the line, because we're making sure everything fits at the early stage. Now, actually, in terms of how I work, not every designer works this way. Everybody will have their own flow. I very, very rarely, I would like to say never, do any type of interior design without actually having a space plan, because we need to know where furniture is going to go. We need to check measurements of said furniture to make sure it's going to fit in the space to start with. Even things like, is your sofa going to even fit through your front door? Which I know is very common because I see it online all the time when it hasn't and a window's been taken out or it's had to be sent back. So I very rarely work without a space plan. And not only does it keep me right, but it then keeps like the client right if they're going on to do everything themselves, if it's maybe just in terms of furniture replacement. But then if it goes to the builder as well, then it keeps them right. Everything's done to scale and every measurement, should be checked twice, make sure they're right. So by the time it gets to the builder, everybody knows on their same page. So that's basically the overall of what a space plan is. You can use it to help with your furniture design. So if you're planning like custom built-ins, we would look at, what actually fits in the space. Is there space there for a drawer to open? Is there space for a cupboard to open? Is there space for that handle? Like these are like little minor things, but that's what's going to cause problems in your design further down the line if you can't actually make what you're putting in there function the way it should be. You can also use space planning for things like if you have, let's say, a kitchen dining and you want to open plan that space. This is things that we've done for clients before in the past. Open plan is very popular because people tend to like that open space at the back, especially if, let's say, you've got a family, then you can do the cooking and kids can be sitting at the dining table and you're all, open in that space. And then you've got your living room more as a nook for, the evenings and things like that. So that comes back down to space planning as well. So for something like that, you would probably then have a space plan of the kitchen. You would have a space plan of where your dining table and things like that's going to go, making sure there's actually space for everybody to sit around the table and be able to pull the chairs out and sit down, and then access probably to your back door or patios, which will be at the back as well, because it's very obvious when items have been put into a space that are actually too big for it. Because you'll find yourself, squeezing through tight corners, or you can't pull that chair out, or you need to move the table out to be able to do that, which I get in some homes has to be done. But if we can work around that and get the space plan right from the get-go, then it just gives us full confidence when we go to actually purchasing furniture for the space and anything custom especially, that it's actually going to work in the end. So a big thing to take into consideration when you're doing a space plan is actually the proportion of items in there. So let's say, right, this is where your items are going to go. You know how you're going to move through the space, but what is proportion of items? So a proportion of your items is, like, for example, which is very obvious, a telly that's too big for the TV unit that's underneath it, a rug that is far too small for the couch that it is meant to be positioning. Because if you look at items individually, yes, they might work, yes, they might be okay, but we need to look at items collectively as a whole. So looking back to a bird's eye view of the space in terms of it being space planning, we would look at the items, how they look together in terms of scale. This becomes more obvious when we get to the visual part because we're actually building up 3D and we get to look at it again there. But proportion is very key, and that affects not only the aesthetics of that, but it just affects, I think you can feel if something's off in a space, and that will be a proportion issue as much as it is a space plan issue. Another thing is when you get to the flow of the space, that's like basically, we've said before, how you're moving through the space. So if you're going from hallway to living room to dining to kitchen to utility, which is quite a common one, or if this is a bit more of a commercial example, but if you're having to walk through one part of a commercial restaurant to get to the other, which is something we're also working on with a client right now, we are thinking, right, well, what is that person actually going to see when they go through this phase to get to their actual table? Because that is very important, especially in commercial. So in that you also have your transition phase spaces. So that is like your hallway and your landing. They are part of your space planning as well, because that's usually, in terms of how a person would live, that's maybe where things get dumped before they move to the next step. So taking things upstairs, it might go on the landing. Taking things downstairs, it might sit, somewhere as well. So we're wanting to look at how the client actually moves through the space to get to the next phase. And this is also, again, coming into who actually lives in the space, because you're all going to be crossing paths and have all your stuff lying around everywhere. This is really good to bring back, similar to our last episode when we spoke about building your own home, because yes, the architect already has his plans already, but when we go deeper into space planning and how you're actually working through the plans, we'll be able to identify if any changes need to be made at that phase, rather than waiting until your walls and things are already up. So very common for space planning is, again, if you're building your own extension. So let's say you're not doing your own self-build quite, but you are planning to modify your home in terms of adding extra space onto it. So some great examples of this is a common extension, of course. We also have garage conversions, which plug our sponsor here, the Garage Conversion Co. They are doing exactly that, adding extra space into your home. So let's say you are going down the garage conversion route here. You have very many possibilities of what you could do there. You might choose to just use it as an extra room, but you also might choose to add it into a space that you already have. So again, that's an example of a wall coming down. So then you need to think, well, how are you actually going to use that space? Because even though you're making it bigger, doesn't mean it's actually working better for you. This is something I see time and time again, where spaces are getting made bigger. We all want bigger, but then we're not filling it with the right sized furniture to then fit that space, or everything's, squished into one corner because that's kind of where it was before, and we're not really considering what's now been placed on the other walls. Another thing, if you're making your space bigger here, is you also need to add in different types of lighting to that space. So this isn't just overhead lighting, the big light as we all call it, but also your mood lighting. So this is all your fancy lighting in your alcoves and things like that go in. Because if you are making your space bigger, you then have more zones, especially if it's open plan, to consider when you're doing it. So that could look like lighting in an alcove media. It could look like a nice side lamp on a board, or nice type of, overhanging light that goes onto your couch. Then this will then go back and tie into your electrics. So you can see here how a space plan is very much a blueprint for everything. We've gone over positioning of your furniture here. We've gone over the scale of it, making sure it's all proportional to each other. And we've gone over the flow of it. And when any single one of these points is off, you'll see it when you come into your space. Usually this is something that clients reach out to us with because they've got everything there, but something's just not quite working yet, and it's usually because one of these points is actually imbalanced. We actually worked with a client last year who was planning a full home renovation, and one of the big things we spoke about was the floor plan and getting the space plan right. Now, I noticed upon our initial home consultation visit, they had absolutely loads of furniture. They had loads of storage, but it was all very shop bought. It was all very IKEA, mix and match, which is obviously fine. And it did the purpose of the storage, but the space just felt off balance. Now, this is because the furniture was very mix and match. It was very here's a drawer unit, here's a drawer unit, here's a drawer unit. So not going to say it looked messy, but it looked untidy visually, because it was there's a unit, there's a unit, there's a unit. So that was very overpowering and very bulky in the space. So then what we came up with is, why can't we modify the space to create that built-in? So not only is that going to maximise your storage, because even if you think about when you're buying just store-bought, you've got that little slither in the side that's dead space, and I think I covered this in one of our previous episodes about built-ins, but you also then have this very visually interrupted, there's no clean lines involved, so then that makes the balance of the space feel off. So that's a built-in thing. Then you have the flow of the space. So if you're adding furniture in there that is too bulky, then it might upset the flow. So an example of this is you walk into a room and the table juts out, or your sofa arm juts out. So you just have to walk around that slightly. And I know it might just be a very minor thing, but it's something that could then just interrupt how you move through that space daily. So taking that back into consideration is Like, it's all these just finer details that are going to have maximum output at the end. And again, that is why clients come to us, because everything looks like it should work, but at the same time it just doesn't. And it's just maybe hard to identify what that actually is. But then I find that once we've been out, usually it is quite obvious, and it might not be everything. Like, usually, you know, like, we all know kind of how to set up a living room, but it's just maybe not been set up in a way that works for them. And that comes back to maybe they've seen it online, they've really liked it online, but they've not actually considered if it's scaled right for their space, or they've seen something on Pinterest and it's, again, just not quite right for their space, their family, and how they move through it. So space planning, yeah, I absolutely love it. I really like technical side in terms of being a designer. So it's just a part of the workflow that I enjoy doing, but it's also the part where you get to understand your clients, you get to know them. And I really love that, because it's just so personal, and being able to present something at the end where they not only can see it, but they actually just understand better. Because if we were presenting somebody with a space plan, we'd be saying, so we've put this here because you've got this here and blah, blah, blah here, and you told us you like to live like this, so we've done this. And being able to present that back to the client and actually help them understand the space is just an amazing feeling. And it's something we always get really good feedback on, because we are not just setting your home up for, you know, to look good, which I say all the time. We're setting up for you to live in for the next 10 to 15 years. And by giving you that understanding of your space and how it's actually pieced together, it'll just help you for the design that we're doing now, but anything you do in the future as well. So I hope this episode has given you a better understanding of what space planning actually is. It's something, again, that we do include in, I want to say, like 99.99% of every single service we do. We tend not to work on a design process without one, just because they are so valuable and a key point in our design process. And again, it's something that's passed between us, the designer, the architect, the builder. It's something that if we're doing a kitchen design, we'll then take that out to the kitchen showrooms that we work with, to plug into theirs to make sure dimensions and scale like that are all the same. Yes, you can do a space plan on a bit of paper and take your measurements. We do everything on CAD, so everything's to scale. And then it's just presented in, you know, the professional way, which we of course like to work in that manner. So if you are struggling with your space, something feels off, you're not sure if it's the zoning, if it's the proportion, if it's your lighting making things feel funny, or if you just don't have the storage tested set up for your needs, then it might be a space plan issue and you might want to get in touch with us. So if you might be interested in a service like this, or included in more of a full design service, then you can reach out to us many ways. We are mostly active on Instagram, which is afta.interiors, and you can drop us a DM there anytime and we'll get back to you and just have a chat about what you need. We've also got our website set up with a contact form if you'd like to fill in a little pre-questionnaire on there first. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope it's gave you a better understanding of what space planning is and what we look for to identify as the designer, and how we'll kind of work through that and what ticks in our brains when we come into your home. So I will see you in the next one.